Did you talked to me a little about the CCC camp, and did you ever try to go down that way?
There was a CCC camp in the area, and as I recall, it was on the road that goes out toward Lansing off of 27 down to the foot of the mountain. They had a good group of young men there that did work all over the place, building trails in the mountains and roads and all the stuff they did back in those days. They also were pretty competitive when it came to sports, baseball being the main one. And various CC camps had baseball teams that competed with each other, and they'd come to Wartburg to play. And as I recall, the team that was located here was a pretty good team. But one Sunday afternoon, one of my friends and I decided we'd walk out to the CCC camp. And we left after church and walked out there, and it started raining while we were there. We walked from there back into town in just a soaking rain. And we were, of course, wet to the skin when we got back. And I remember going in the house and taking off my clothes, and I didn't have any more sense but to hang my pants up in the clothes closet. About 3 days later, they were building. You could smell it all over the house.
Did anything impress you about the stores in town? Was there anything unusual about the currency that was being traded around?
Oh, one of the things that was interesting to me was that we had Gobi coins. The Gobi Lumber Company had their own currency. I don't know much about it, except that I nearly always had some Gobi coins in my pocket. You couldn't spend it anywhere except here in Morgan County. Wasn't worth anything anywhere else, but you could spend it. I could go to the store and buy a candy bar. Never did have enough money to buy much of anything, but I thought it was interesting that there was this company that had its own currency.
So did you say it was the fall of your 8th grade year, kind of, or just before that you all moved here? And is that right?
In the what now?
In the fall of your 8th grade.
Yes. When we moved here, I started the 8th grade that fall. And I was in the 8th grade, first year of high school here, and good 2 years. Had a lot of friends, I thought. As far as I know, some of them still are. Not many of them around anymore.
Right.
It was good. I had a good time while I was here. I couldn't, I had nothing to complain about. I had enough to eat. I went to school. I went to church and had some friends. And what more could you ask for in those days?
We moved from Knox County to Morgan County. It was a little more country than you've been used to.
There were some things that were quite different. For one, water was a different situation. We had a well. I guess it was a community well that set up near the house where we lived, and it served a number of houses that were in that area. It was a well had a long cylinder bucket that was fastened to a rope, and you'd let the bucket down into the well on a big pulley wheel. You'd let the bucket down, and you could tell when it got full of water, and then you'd pull it back up with a rope and get it up to the top, and you'd have your bucket sitting there, and you'd get the bottom of that big cylinder in the bucket, and you pull a little lever up and a little thing up the top that opened up the valve in the bottom and let the water run out of the bucket that came from the well. And we got water there for everything. That was our drinking water. That's the water we drew enough water when it was necessary to wash clothes and things like that. And little difference in the taste of the water because it was what we call hard water, I guess, mineral water. But you get used to it and make it just real well. But that was a different experience.
So it wasn't too much of an adjustment for you. But then tell the story of how you came to live at Nemo, or down
Well, my uncle, the first winter we lived here, my uncle was still pastor at Grace Baptist Church in Knoxville, in Knox County, and he had gone back in the fall of the year to go rabbit hunting with some friends there. And during that hunt, a man had slipped and fallen, and the gun had gone off, and the buckshot caught Uncle Sam in the left side of his head. He had a whole bunch of buckshot in the left side of his face and head, and on his shoulder, I think, and put his left eye out. And he recovered sufficiently enough that he taught school the rest of the year and coached during the winter. Felt like he needed to get away from things and just to where he could relax and not have so much responsibilities. So we went out on, he says Nemo, now that's, you know, that y'all know it with that name, I guess. I don't think it had a name when we went out there. But anyhow, we went out that road across the Every River, and you went around across the bridge and up the road and around a real sharp hairpin curve. And just as you came out of that curve, there was a little lane that turned off to the right and went down. And there was an old sawmill site, and Uncle Sam had gotten permission to use some old lumber and stuff that was there. And we built a cabin out there. I'm not sure, 12, 15 square feet, or 15 by 12, or maybe 15, 20, I don't recall how much it was. But anyhow, it was big enough that they built a frame for their bed, and Uncle Sam and Sally had a bed, and I suppose they had I don't remember what David slept in, but we also built bunks up one side of the wall. We had about 4 bunks up one wall, and I slept in one of the bunks, and they slept in the bed.
Did you sleep, remember which one you slept in? Did you sleep up high or down low?
What?
Did you sleep up high or down low?
It seemed like I slept in the middle. I'm not sure.
Did you have guests come and stay in those?
There was nearly always some family members came out to spend a few days, and of course they slept in the bunks likewise. Had some folks like that come in. Learned to cook with a Dutch oven. Whether you remember a Dutch oven or not, it was a big round skillet type thing with a metal top on it that had sides around the top that you put coals in the lid. So you had heat coming up from the bottom and heat going down from the top. And you could never make any better cornbread than you could get out of a Dutch oven. That was just good eating. Of course, we cooked other things in it too. That's where we cooked the meat. Did a lot of the cooking like that outside. There was a little pot-bellied stove they had inside that sometimes we fixed breakfast on or something like that. But we did a lot of our cooking out on that Dutch oven.
Just so we've got a lot of folks that live, or several folks that live out in that very vicinity. And I know almost all of you are probably familiar with it. It's still there today. I mean, the side, you just go cross the bridge, through the sharp hairpin, and that road to what's now Obed Bridge, I guess. Is that what we call it? Right there where the gate is. We drove out there just kind of...
The cabin we lived in was just sort of up from where that gate is.
Across the creek. You said the road at that point stopped on that side. I don't know if somebody made a logging road or whatever it was, then you had just a dirt road down to the creek. And it didn't cross it?
Oh, the road didn't cross the creek, so we stopped, we parked the car when we got to the creek and walked to just a short distance up there. Great big spring, some of the best water you could ever drink, and it was, we were able to keep the crocks with milk in it and keep the milk cold in that spring. And kind of primitive living, but it was a lot of fun.
How did you occupy your time down there while you were down there?
I just wandered and roamed and did this, that, and the other. We took our cow out. I walked the cow from downtown here. Down here at the edge of Wartburg. I walked the cow out there, and they tell me it was about 8 miles. And out there, the cows roam free too. We milk her in the morning, turn her loose, and Most of the time, the cow would come back up to the road and go down the road and across the river bridge. And there was some good grazing land right at this end of the bridge.
Right where the picnic tables are.
Right. In that
He said it was grassy.
In that area, and there was a lot of grass there. Several cows were grazing in there.
And I believe it's the same bridge. From what I've been able to gather, I think the bridge that was there,
I
his
think
cows
that,
walked
that
across
old bridge that's sitting there now, it
It's the same
seems to me like it probably is the same one. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, it was my job in the afternoon to go find the cow and bring her in the milk. So that I'd start about 2:30 or so in the afternoon. You get up on a high place where you can hear the cow's bells ringing, and you learn the tone of your cow's bell. There were times when I would go out and I would slide down the bluff at the end of where our little lane came up from the cabin and across the road, and slide down the bluff and come out at the end of the bridge. Other times when I wanted to be more adventuresome, I guess I would follow the creek that our spring emptied into. I could follow that creek, and I've often thought if you didn't know where the creek came out, you would think you were headed right back into the middle of the mountains. And so I did not dare leave that creek. If I was walking down through there, I'd been lost. But I'd walk that creek, and I knew where it came out, just above the bridge. And sometimes, I remember one time I played along, and I had a piece of string and a safety pin, and cut a little limb off of a tree and tied that string on with a safety pin, and dug under a log and found a cricket. And that cricket was my bait. And I'd drop it in a little pool of water going down the creek. You know, the creek, as it hit the water, there would be one of these little suckers snap onto it. You pull them out, they'd be that long, maybe 4 or 5 inches. But anyhow, they were easily caught, and I'd pitch them back in and keep on going. I think this particular afternoon I caught about 5 or 6 fish before the cricket wore out. finally, there just wasn't enough of him left to stick on the pin.
What kind of fish were you catching?
Pardon?
What kind of fish were you catching?
There were, all I ever knew was suckers. That's all I ever knew. I don't know what they had. I'm sure there was a better name than that. But I'd get down to where the creek emptied into the river.
That's the creek, by the way, that flows right there through our campground. And we drove across it today, where there's a culvert there now. Of course, there wasn't anything there.
I'd get down to the river, and I'd go up the river just a short distance. And in the summertime, it was not all that deep. And I always carried my ship. I had a 12-gauge shotgun. I never left the cabin without it. I don't know that I ever shot it more than a half a dozen times all summer long, but anyway, I had it. And I'd put the shotgun up over my head like that, and I waded across the river. I thought back about that and knew I didn't have any sense, but just think, out there by myself, if anything happened, nobody would know or nobody would find me. You'd float off down the river. But anyway, that was where I spent a lot of my time, and walk over, across the river, and get the cow and lead her back to the cabin site.
And you took her back across the bridge?
Took the cow back across the bridge. Yeah, the cow didn't much like the water, I don't think. But anyway, we walked back across the bridge and up around the curve and down to the cabin site, and I'd tie her up, and we kept her tied at night so she would be there the next morning. But then after milking in the morning, she was free to roam again.
Did she ever roam very far?
This was about the only place I ever remember the cow going, was in pretty much in that particular place, because I don't know why, but anyway, cows just stayed together in that spot because the grass was there, I guess. And I don't remember finding her anywhere else much.
Did she ever come to town once?
One time the cow, and I never have understood this, but one time the cow walked all the way back to town. And I had to walk her back out there the second time. But
now Now, the train was there when you were there. Did you interact with the train much or see the train much?
I used to see the train. I'd get up on top of that bluff over the end of the river bridge, and you could see the end of the tunnel where the train came through, coming out of Oakdale going north. I could hear it from the south end sometimes. They'd blow the whistle, and I could hear it, but then I'd watch for it, and pretty soon here it came. You could see it coming out of the tunnel and on up the track. And I guess I found out the times that it usually ran through, and sometimes I tried to be where I could see it. That's as close as I ever got to the train track.
I forgot to ask you, while you were in town here, were you always content and happy, or did you ever get kind of disgruntled?
Oh, I can't remember. Most of the time I was doing real well, but there was one summer, I guess it's probably it might have been during the first summer we were there, but there I was 14 years old. I was washing baby diapers and emptying them and washing them, and I was washing dishes, and I was mopping floors, and I was doing the laundry, and I kind of felt like I was being imposed on. And I got kind of tired of it, and I decided to run away. Aunt Sally's nephew happened to be there at that particular time, and he knew what was going on. I packed a suitcase and put it out under the porch of the house, and he promised he wouldn't tell anybody till the next morning. But one night I ran away. After everybody went to sleep, I crawled out the window, picked up the suitcase, walked down across the road there at Mr. Glenn's store, and headed out toward Petros. Somebody came along and picked me up in just no time. I rode to the road that turns off to Petros, and that's where they were going. So I got out, and just a short time later, a big coal truck came along and stopped, and I rode that coal truck all the way to Knoxville, within a few blocks of where my mother lived, which is where I was going. And they let me out to where I told them, and I walked from there to my mother's house. And next day before noon, Uncle Sam was there, and he and Mama talked a while, and I stayed with my mother the rest of that week. I know several days, but then I went back with Uncle Sam, and no repercussions of any kind. Everything was fine. I kind of got over my pouty spell. I really had it good. I was cared for. I was clothed. I was fed. I was educated, and a better education than maybe a lot of kids would have had, because both Uncle Sam and Aunt Sally, he was teaching school at the time. She was a college graduate. And it was a good environment for me to be in. And I learned a lot. Somebody said, Aunt Sally told him one time, said, well, Dan's going to make somebody a good wife. When we were married, I had a lot more housekeeping experience than my wife had. I had cooking experience that she did not have. And when the babies came along, I had a lot more experience. So it was, I was blessed beyond measure. I look back over it and I just say, praise the Lord for the blessings that He brought into my life with the training I had while I lived with them. It was just a real good thing for me.